Hello, my friends. So I've had a few thoughts about some things that are in the headlines recently. So, for those who don't know me, I make a geek podcast to talk about geek-related content, and the thing that's come to me today is this current article about the allegations towards noted fantasy author Neil Gaiman. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Neil Gaiman. I've never have been. I've only recently sort of discovered his work through things like Good Omens and his collaborations with Terry Pratchett. The main experience I had with him years ago was the work he did with Marvel Comics, specifically 1602, which I was a huge fan of. Now, Neil Gaiman has been accused of some quite reprehensible things, and joins a long list of celebrities who have had other accusations levelled against them. People such as Joss Whedon, people such as there's multiple musicians who have had allegations levelled against them in recent years. There's a whole documentary about Marilyn Manson that's about to come out now on Channel 4 here in the UK, and a few others. So, these sort of things are not new, and they are pretty horrible to read and to be constantly exposed. Now, one of the things that comes off the back of that is the whole discussion of whether you should keep consuming an artist's work, whether you should still, can you still allow yourself to read the things that they wrote? Can you allow yourself to enjoy the shows that they made, the films that they made, etc.? And this has been this is where you get into the discussion of the artist versus the art, and specifically separating the art from the artist. And this is one I kind of go back and forth on, because I do think there's some things that become quite hard to separate the art from the artist, especially if they are coming from a single person. So, for example, someone like J.K. Rowling, who's come out for some quite bigoted beliefs in recent years, and then you go back and read things like Harry Potter, and you see just how much of sort of the groundwork for some of the beliefs that she's espousing now are already present in the text, and you can see it. And that's just one modern example. There's plenty of other examples from history of just like terrible people who have written amazing work, but that, going back as far as people like H.P. Lovecraft, where it's like this person was awful, but they wrote some amazing things. So, as nerds, as geeks, my thing here becomes, how do we separate the art from the artist? How do we decide to enjoy the things that we enjoy? Can we still do that? And I do think it's entirely possible. There are some things that will remain problematic in certain things. In certain instances, like for example, I'm doing a podcast episode about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I recently watched with one of my partners. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a great series. I wholeheartedly enjoyed it. I never watched it back in the day, so watching it now as an adult, I really, really enjoyed it. But there are flaws with it, and a lot of those flaws are centered around the character of Xander Harris, who, while played brilliantly by Nicholas Brendan, and the whole cast, the whole writing team are very, very good in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So much of that character is based quite heavily on Joss Whedon. He's very much Joss Whedon's self-insert character, and is very flawed as a result. And this is something that we are going to be discussing in the podcast. There's also other things behind the scenes that affected other characters' plots, etc. But there are also some episodes in that are fantastic, like, despite the people making them. For example, the episode The Body, where Buffy's mother dies, and the discussions that the characters have around death around that are phenomenal and hugely important to a lot of people. And I don't think that Joss Whedon, being a despicable person, should be allowed to take away from how impactful that episode is, because a lot of that episode, while it's the writing comes from him, a lot of that episode also comes from the strength of the performances from the actors, who are doing phenomenal work. And this is where we come back to someone like Neil Gaiman, where the things he's being accused of specifically, I don't think are referenced in any of his work. I don't think there's any allusions to the things he's being accused of in any of his work. But so while the allegations almost seem kind of separate from the work, completely separate from the art, they haven't informed it in any way. It is definitely something that people might struggle with, right? But as far as I'm concerned, if you are a fan of things like Good Omens, American Gods, Neverwhere, any of the other pieces of work that he has created over the years, if you are a fan of those, Sandman, for example, if you're a fan of those works and you enjoy those works, then, and especially if those works had a meaning to you that you took from them, that is almost kind of separate from the artist. And the same holds true for something like Harry Potter with J.K. Rowling, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or even pieces of music. Marilyn Manson might not be the best example, but he's the one that's pertinent in my head. If some of the songs that he wrote about, for example, like drug addiction, for example, helped you through specific times in your life, those might be songs that are quite personal to you. And this is the thing, I think, where you take a lot of the meaning from a piece of work yourself. The way what a work is and how it's written and what the author puts in there is only part of it. Part of it is also what people make of the work. And in something like a collaborative work, something like television, we do see this because the actors will put their own things into the work as well. So it becomes a collaborative medium in and of itself. But it becomes even more true with you as the audience. How the audience decides to interpret and react to a work becomes its own thing. And if you were moved by something like The Body from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or if you were moved by Coraline, which was written by Neil Gaiman, or if you were moved by Harry Potter, that's not really something anyone can take away from you, even the artists themselves. Even if the artist themselves turns out to be an absolute piece of shit, right? They cannot take away from you what you felt from that work. The only thing is, you have to decide if you are still willing to engage with that work now knowing what you know about the artist. And for some people, that becomes something that they can't do anymore. It can become very hard to engage with a particular piece of work based on certain actions of the people who made it. For example, myself, I've never been a huge fan of Harry Potter. So as a result, the things that J.K. Rowling is saying and espousing now make me very unlikely to ever go back to those books and read them. However, I am more willing to engage with the films because the films are a collaborative effort. They are coming from other people. Those performances, like her words, her directions, everything that she created has then been reinterpreted and reproduced by other people as part of a collaborative effort to make a film. And I've watched those films with my kids. I have better memories attached to those films, even though I haven't seen all of those either, than I do to the books that I read alone as a teenager. Because reading those as a teenager, I was like, all right, they're not great. I think I kind of missed the boat on Harry Potter. I was a bit too old for it. Likewise with Buffy and Neil Gaiman, I've come to some of Neil Gaiman's works. The works that I've come to, I haven't really experienced much of as novels. I've seen things like Good Omens and the Coraline film, and I've fallen in love with those. And with something like Good Omens, especially, that's also a collaborative work with Terry Pratchett, who himself was amazing, and things like that. But and it comes with music as well. You've got to decide: are you willing to listen to someone's song? There might be some songs from an artist that you completely distance yourself from because of the things they're accused of and the tones in it. So yeah, it's just amusing, art versus artist, and where do you stand on it? But I think if you enjoy a work, despite the artist being problematic, no one can take away what it means to you, even the artist